Matthew had always liked older women, though he couldn't explain why. Young women his age seemed silly and superficial to him. They reminded him of dolls with whom there was nothing to talk about, and that often made him sad. Long-term relationships never worked out, and he couldn't tolerate more than 2 or 3 dates. But he found that he admired mature women who knew their worth and knew what they wanted. There was no pretense or deception about them. These women had stopped trying to hide their flaws and knew how to show them off confidently. Matthew had dated a neighbor from his apartment complex a few times. She was generous in appearance, though perhaps less fortunate in facial features. She had small, deep-set eyes, a wide nose, and a double chin, yet she held herself with the confidence of a queen. For a moment, Matthew even thought he had fallen in love with her. It didn't bother him that she was 20 years older, or that she had been married 3 times. He liked everything about her, her character and confidence. However, their brief connection was cut short when her husband returned. Rivalry with a man who was older and more experienced was beyond Matthew's ability to handle. This broke the young student's heart, and for a while he stepped away from romantic relationships. He focused on his studies and hobbies, trying to distract himself from the emptiness he felt. He often took long walks, listened to music, and read books to keep himself occupied. He even tried his hand at cooking, experimenting with different recipes to pass the time. But nature takes its course, and eventually Matthew met a new woman named Veronica. Although she was only 8 years older, which seemed a minor difference compared to his previous experiences, she managed to win him over. Veronica was different from anyone he had met before, and there was something about her that made Matthew feel at ease. She had a calm and balanced personality, and her intelligence and maturity were qualities that Matthew found incredibly attractive. Perhaps it was her character that attracted Matthew. Veronica wasn't interested in fancy parties and shopping malls. Instead, she spent her free time reading books about the 20th century. She loved history and often shared interesting facts and stories with Matthew that he found fascinating. 2 months after they began dating, Veronica invited Matthew to her home. She made it clear that she had a condition: she would not take their relationship to the next level without an official commitment. As a result, they decided to get married. Although the decision was unexpected, Matthew felt it was the right one. He wanted to build a life with Veronica and was ready to take that step. The wedding seemed like some sort of foggy blur to Matthew. The only clear memory of that day was not Veronica, but his new mother-in-law, Catherine. He had caught Catherine's gaze several times throughout the celebration, but it wasn't a look of parental concern for her daughter. There was something different in her eyes that he couldn't understand. He felt some unspoken connection with Catherine, a sense of understanding he hadn't expected. After the wedding, Matthew and Veronica had moved into her grandmother's old apartment, which was in the same building where Catherine lived. It seemed practical at the moment. The apartment was small but cozy, with old-fashioned furniture that gave it a nostalgic charm. Veronica showed little interest in household chores, preferring to spend her time reading. Catherine often came over to help, but her efforts were mostly in vain. Dishes piled up in the sink, and spilled tea was wiped up with a sock. Matthew found it amusing at first. No one nagged him about his scattered socks or left toilet seat. No one scolded him for staying late at work. Over time, however, these things began to annoy him. The family bed was often strewn with crumbs from Veronica's late-night snacks, and the lack of order began to wear him down. The clutter prevented Matthew from relaxing, and he began to feel a growing sense of frustration. The only thing that kept Matthew from thinking about divorce was a sense of responsibility. He had made a commitment, and he wanted to honor it. Veronica's mother often tried to convince her daughter to take better care of her husband, but Veronica was never interested. She was content in her own world, absorbed in books and daydreams. Matthew and Veronica had a son, a very fidgety child, and Catherine took over most of the care, giving Veronica time to relax. Catherine was always ready to help cooking, cleaning, taking care of the baby. Despite her mother's best efforts, Veronica never seemed to be able to accept the role of mother. She often seemed aloof, as if she were in a different place. One evening when Matthew was not home, Veronica quietly gathered her things and left, leaving behind a note. It read, "Please don't blame me. I realize that family life is not for me. Some people are born for it, but I'm not one of them. Don't look for me, I've already filed for divorce." Matthew returned home and found the note on the dining room table. He was overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions: danger, confusion, resentment, and, strangely, relief. He felt a strange sense of freedom, as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. On shaky legs, he went up to Catherine's apartment to tell her what had happened. Catherine opened the door, holding little Ethan in her arms, who immediately reached for his father. Seeing Matthew's distraught state, she quickly realized that something was wrong. She led him into the house, put Ethan to bed, and then sat down next to Matthew to listen to him. Catherine listened patiently as Matthew explained everything. She admitted that Veronica had often told her that she wasn't happy and dreamed of a different life. Catherine tried to justify her daughter's act, but she saw the pain it had caused Matthew. At that moment, she decided that she would help him in any way she could. She assured Matthew that they would take care of Ethan together, promised him that he wasn't alone, and Matthew found comfort in her words. After that, life took a different turn. Catherine became a support to Matthew, helping him adjust to being a single father. She did the housework while Matthew worked, and over time they grew close. They developed a daily routine that suited them both, and the small apartment began to feel like a real home. The neighbors at first found it strange that Matthew and his mother-in-law were living together, but they didn't care for the gossip. Catherine was happy to be near Ethan, who soon began to call her mom. This warmed Catherine's heart, and she accepted her role without hesitation. And a year later, something unexpected happened. A daughter appeared in Catherine and Matthew's life. It was a new beginning for all of them, and Matthew finally found the happiness he had long sought. Family life was unconventional, but it worked. Matthew found joy in the simple moments, the way Ethan played, the way Catherine cared for their daughter, the way they spent quiet evenings together. He realized that happiness lies not in living a perfect life, but in finding contentment in imperfections. Matthew also found that he was growing as a person. He learned to be more patient, more understanding, and more grateful to those around him. Catherine, too, has found a new sense of purpose. She had spent so many years raising her daughter alone, and now she had a second chance to start a family. She and Matthew supported each other through the challenges of parenthood, and their bond grew stronger every day. Over time, the small apartment became a place filled with laughter and love. They celebrated birthdays, holidays, and the little milestones that marked their family journey. Ethan was a bright and inquisitive child, always asking questions and eager to learn. Catherine took pride in teaching him, and Matthew loved spending his weekends exploring the world with his son. Their daughter, Anna, brought even more joy into their lives. She was a happy, malleable child, and her laughter was music to their ears. The neighbors eventually stopped gossiping and began to accept their unique family dynamic. They saw how happy Matthew, Catherine, Ethan, and Anna were together and couldn't help but be moved by their story. It was a story of resilience, love, and the unexpected paths that life sometimes chooses to take. And for Matthew, it was proof that happiness can be found in the most unlikely places. He went from feeling lost and alone to finding a family that filled his heart with joy. It wasn't the life Matthew had envisioned, but it was better. He found love, not the love he expected, but sincere and lasting. Catherine became his partner, his confidant, and the person he relied on most. Together they created a home where their children could grow up surrounded by love and support. And that, Matthew realized, was all he had ever wanted.